Let's take a look at some of the basics about the file system that's employed in the Windows Server 2008 platform, and then go into a little more details about some of the new tools and some of the repackaging of the tools in some different videos. For now, let's talk about file system basics. And I want to talk about some nomenclature. There's some confusion out there when we talk about NTFS. Now, NTFS was New Technology File System or File Storage. You hear all kind of definitions for this acronym out there, but NTFS is the system that that's employed to store the data on the disk, or it's the disk management functionality. Now, the confusion comes in that there's 5 major versions of this. The bottom line is NTFS is what you want to use. It is the file management system that you want to employ on your disk. It's the most secure and all that sort of stuff. Okay, well, here's the nomenclature you need to understand. First of all, from Windows NT, which goes way back into the early 90s, through NT 4.0, which was around 1996, Microsoft released NTFS version 1.0, 1.1, and 1.2. Then, and you will normally hear that called NT4, okay? Then with Windows 2000, which was called NT5, if you will, the NTFS version was 3.0. Notice we skipped a 2.0 version, so there's NTFS 3.0. And then when Windows Server 2003 came out, which was also called Windows NT6, but 2003 was the kind of the marketing term, NTFS was setting at version 3.1. Okay, now we're at Windows Server 2008, and the only name I've heard this given is just simply Windows Server 2008 NTFS. I actually haven't seen a version number out there for it, so maybe by the time you get this video that version number will be out there. But so far, when you hear Windows Server 2008, we're at the latest version of NTFS. Now, for the most part, these versions are backward compatible, but keep in mind, as of right now, Windows Server 2000 or Windows 2000 is as far back as you should be working in your networks. Any version prior to 2000 is going to be considered, both on the client side and on the server side, is going to be considered to be a security issue, and you really should be cleaning those out as soon as possible. Also, some of the volume shadow copy service and so forth is not supported in earlier versions, so like everything else in technology, you want to be upgraded as much as possible. Now, how do we manage the file system? Well, we're still using the disk management tool for most domain controllers. Now, there is something that we'll talk about in a different video. Once we add the file services role to a domain controller, we get a new management tool, and it's kind of a repackaging of a number of different management tools, but there is some kind of cool things thrown in there. But for right now, we're going to continue to use the disk management tool. Let me show you that in case you haven't seen it. So I've jumped out to the desktop, and a couple of ways to get to the management tool. If I go to Server Manager, and this is the way we should start to think about moving around. If I just open the Server Manager and expand storage, you will see disk management. And if I click on disk management and bring that up, it is the same old disk management tool that you've seen for quite a while. I can do all kinds of things. For example, I can click on this and convert it to a dynamic disk. I can look at properties on it. I can see what policies have been applied to it. I can enable write caching. I can enable advanced performance. I can do all kinds of things here. Okay, so I'll just cancel out of this. Notice I can right click. I can change drive letter and paths, shrink volumes and so forth. If I was on a dynamic disk, I could add mirrors and all this sort of thing. Notice over here to the right, there's some more actions I can take. I can refresh, I can rescan disks, and I can start to do some more things. So this hasn't really changed a whole lot. So you're not going to see anything drastically different here. It is in the Server Manager, and just for those of you guys who can't break old habits, I can also right click on the computer icon and go to Manage Disks, and it takes me back into Server Manager to the same place. So just wanted you to be aware that that'll get you back to the same place. Okay. So again, from a file system standpoint, that's where we're at. Now, in the next video, we'll talk about some of the enhancements and some of the things that are starting to get a little different about NTFS at the Windows Server 2008 version. Now let's take a look at what's new in the file system, or what are we getting that's kind of new and jazzy in Windows Server 2008. First of all, you're going to hear about this but you don't read a lot about it under the hood, and that is self-healing NTFS. This is actually kind of cool. What's happening, Microsoft rewrote the kernel and they made some changes so that on a separate thread in a different process there is a background low-level disk repair being performed constantly on NTFS. Now think of this as automatic check disk running from time to time. You don't know when it's running, you don't know what's happening with this thing. The bottom line is you don't have any configurational control over this thing. There's no tool to mess with it. Not at this point anyway. We might see one later. And the only way that you'll ever know that this thing is running is if you start to get error messages about check disk or about disk errors. Now, Microsoft does say, however, that there could be, quote, extreme circumstances when you would still have to manually run check disk. Okay, but for the most part, this is going to automatically take care of damaged sectors and those sorts of things. Now, one of the big things that you will see, most of the enhancements that you will see in the file system come through the File Server Resource Manager. Okay, now this thing is something that is basically a repackaging of a lot of the old tools. Okay, and you won't even see this thing until you add the file services role to your domain controller. So let's go do that and see what we get for our trouble here. And so let's jump out to the server manager. So I've gone to the desktop. I will click on Start, and then I'll go to Server Manager. And then if I scroll down in the Server Manager, you'll notice I can add roles. So I'll add a role here. Hit Next. You've seen this in other videos. And notice the File Services role. I will click. It's going to tell me what File Services does. Well, let me show you something here. It's pointing out that Search Service and Indexing Service cannot be installed on the same computer. And so I'm going to tell it File Server. And then I want to add services for the network file system. No, I don't. I want to add File Server Resource Manager. And if you click on every one of these, notice the services for network file systems, since I brought that up, enables you to give Unix client computers access to files. But anyway, we'll just take the File Services Resource Manager, and you can monitor the amount of disk space, and a usage threshold is a percentage of the total capacity of a volume and so forth. So I'm going to have to select the volumes I want to monitor, so I'll tell it that right here. And I can set options on reports that I want to generate, and so I'll hit Next. And notice I can set to receive reports by email, and I can put in email addresses and so forth. So anyway, I will leave that off for now, and I will just simply install this. And so it'll take it a couple of seconds to actually install the File Services role on this computer. And rather than have to sit and wait on it, I'm going to pause the video and get back to you once this is installed. Okay, so we just completed, and notice I'm getting a detected error and a snap-in, and it's telling me to shut down and restart the MMC. So I'll click past this, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But notice my Add Roles wizard went in successfully, and what's happening here is I'm seeing that the Roles wizard is now trying to load the new snap-in in the MMC so that I can see this thing. And occasionally you will see these errors. Don't panic on them. We're waiting for all these snap-ins to complete. I'm going ahead and close the successful installation. And now on the Server Manager, let me close the Server Manager, and then we'll reopen it. And a lot of times that will take care of these errors that you see on these snap-ins. So basically what I did is I installed that server service or that server role with the Server Manager open. And so that created an issue on the snap-in. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into Server Manager here. It's kind of good that you see this because you will see these from time to time. But notice now when I go look at roles and I expand the roles, you'll now see there's the File Services snap-in. So it's loaded the snap-in. It's just trying to configure it. So let's go take a look at it right quick as it's coming in. And notice it's added the snap-in now. And we see, let me drag this over, Share and Storage Management, and I'll just show you. Here's our File Server Resource Manager. Notice here's Quota Management. It's the same thing that you've seen before, but notice now we have File Screening Management. We also have Storage Management Reports, or storage reports management. Now this is really some cool stuff, and I'm going to drag this over. The resolution on these videos makes it a little tough, but if I right click, I can schedule a new report, and notice what I can do is I can create reports, and I can select volumes and folders to report on. And notice I'm just going to grab if I go into users, I'll just grab the administrator, and I can see duplicate files, file screenings, files by file group, large files. Notice least recently accessed files, most recently accessed files. So there's a lot of cool things that I can do. And let me just grab one here. And if I preview selected reports, it'll show me some various things. But I can edit these things, and I can do all kinds of things, but I can really see what's going on my file server. And so that's a new thing that's out there in the file server's resource manager. So anyway, this is kind of a repackaging, but there's some cool tools. And so that's one example of some of the enhancements that you're seeing in this version of NTFS. Now there is one bit of functionality that's new in Windows Server 2008, and that's full volume encryption. And I just want to bring it to your attention here. It's just a little overview, but I want you to know about this. This was actually introduced in Vista, and it's now in the server product for the first time. Full volume encryption lets us protect data at the file system level. Now this originally came about on the client side because of the security risk that laptops are. We had an issue in the news here in Nashville just a few months ago where a government employee, or rather not a government employee, but at a government office there was a break-in and somebody stole a bunch of laptops, and they had a bunch of personal taxpayer identification on those laptops, and so this was a big, huge deal. Thankfully, the police found out who did the burglary, and they broke in and they basically arrested them and found the laptops, and everything was fine. So anyway, we need to protect our data at the file system level. Now on our servers, we can do this to protect those servers that are out in branch office locations. Physical security on the server is not what we wish it was, or not what it should be. So we can do this on the server level, and again, I want to tell you about this and show you how to set it up, and then direct you out to some more resources. So notice we can protect user files and system files on a machine, and right now we're going to talk about the Windows Server side. Now on system files, this includes swap files and hibernation files, as well as data volumes themselves. So this is huge that we can now protect this information even against just actual theft of the hard drive, if you will. Now there are some requirements, and you need to go out to Microsoft's website, do a search on full volume encryption, and really start to read up on this before you implement it. Now on the server side, there are some requirements. Number one, you need 2 NTFS disk partitions. One of these partitions is going to hold your system volume. Now that system volume should be at least 1.5 gigabytes in size, and it should be set as the active partition. You also need one volume for the operating system, and then there are some other ones. Your BIOS is involved here. So again, go out to Microsoft's website, do a search on full volume encryption, and you'll get all kinds of information about this. This is not a trivial decision to make, so you need to prepare for this and look at some system configuration, hardware configuration, and so forth. Now, to install full volume encryption, what we're actually going to do is add the BitLock feature in the Server Manager. So let's go out to Server Manager, and I'll show you this. So here we are at the desktop, and I will simply click on Start Server Manager. I can also go in through Administrative Tools and bring this up. But notice on Features here, if I expand Features, then if I just click on Features, then I can go in and add features. And you'll notice BitLocker Drive Encryption. So I will check that, go Next, and it's going to start the process of installing this. I'm not going to install it here, but this is the way you would kick this off. But again, you need to do some research on what all is involved and get your plan together. So anyway, that's full volume encryption. Really cool security tool that you can now use on the server itself, as well as on the Vista side on your clients as well. Okay, so read up on it, see what it can do for you.